She laughed as if teasing me, but her eyes lingered too long when she said, "You look too good tonight. I might just take you with me." I smiled back, but inside I couldn't shake the thought, what if she actually meant it? I had just returned from a long day, the kind that leaves you moving slower than usual, your mind weighed down by the leftover noise of the world. The neighborhood was quiet, the sun just dipping beneath the rooftops, painting the street in a fading gold. I was unlocking my door when the soft click of heels caught my attention. Turning, I saw her. My neighbor. She was stepping out of her house, closing the door with a careful pull, as though she wanted to leave the day behind her. A light dress skimmed against her frame, the fabric shifting gently with each step. Her hair was gathered loosely, strands falling free in a way that looked unplanned but perfect. Even from where I stood, I caught the faintest trace of her perfume, something subtle, floral, like a memory carried on the evening air. For a moment, I just watched, not out of rudeness but out of that quiet awe that sometimes sneaks up on you when life shows you something unexpectedly beautiful. She noticed me then. Her eyes swept over me, pausing as though she had discovered something worth holding on to. Her lips curved into a smile, confident, playful, yet touched with warmth. "You look too good tonight," she said, her voice carrying the easy laughter of someone unafraid to tease. She let the pause hang for just a heartbeat before adding with a spark in her eyes, "I might just take you with me." Her laugh followed the words, light and effortless, but the sound did something to me. It wasn't just humor, it was layered, carrying the edge of something unspoken. I smiled back, though my chest tightened in ways I couldn't explain. "That's a dangerous offer," I managed, my voice lower than I expected. She tilted her head slightly, as though considering me, as though waiting to see if I would push back or let the moment pass. Her laughter softened into a smile, a lingering curve of her lips that told me she had enjoyed my reaction more than the joke itself. Then, with a small wave of her hand, she turned and began walking down the steps toward her car. The soft sound of her heels faded into the evening, leaving me standing at my doorway, my keys still in hand. It should have been nothing. A playful comment. A neighbor's casual tease. But as the quiet settled back around me, her words lingered in the air. The way her eyes had paused on mine. The way her laugh had reached something deeper than just amusement. I leaned against the doorframe, realizing that my chest still carried the warmth of the moment, as though her words had left a mark I couldn't brush away. She had laughed, yes. But a part of me couldn't help asking, what if she hadn't been joking? That night I couldn't sleep as easily as I usually did. Her words played back in my head, looping in the quiet. "You look too good tonight. I might just take you with me." It should have been nothing more than a tease, a neighbor's passing joke, but the way she had looked at me, eyes holding mine a little too long, smile resting a little too knowingly, left me wondering if there was more beneath it. The next morning, I found myself noticing things I hadn't before. The way her curtains swayed slightly whenever she opened her windows. The sound of her voice drifting through the hedge when she took phone calls on her porch. She had always been there, just a few steps away, but suddenly she seemed closer than she had ever been. Later that week, our paths crossed again. I was leaving the house, adjusting my jacket, when she appeared at her mailbox. Her hair was pinned differently this time, a neat twist at the back, but a few strands escaped to soften her face. She wore a simple blouse and skirt, nothing extravagant, but it struck me how she made the ordinary look remarkable. "Morning," I said, lifting a hand. Her eyes found me instantly, and the faintest smile touched her lips. "Morning," she echoed, her tone light, but I caught a spark of amusement, like she knew I was still replaying her words from before. We didn't linger long, just a brief exchange, the kind neighbors might share, but I felt something shift. The silence between our words wasn't empty. It was filled with something waiting, something neither of us wanted to name yet. As the days passed, I realized I was anticipating her presence. When I heard the creak of her door, I'd pause, half hoping she would step out. When her car pulled into the driveway, I'd glance up from whatever I was doing, curious if she'd notice me. One evening, as I was watering the small plants near my porch, she walked by, carrying a grocery bag. She slowed when she saw me. Hard at work, she teased, nodding toward the hose in my hand. Trying to keep them alive, I said with a smile. Her laugh came easily, soft but genuine, and it lingered in the air between us. She shifted the bag slightly, and for the briefest moment, our eyes caught and held. There was no need for words, just the quiet acknowledgement of something that was beginning to stir. When she finally turned to go, I found myself watching until she disappeared inside. My chest felt oddly light, but my mind restless. What unsettled me most wasn't her teasing words anymore. It was how much I wanted to hear them again. The weather turned without warning one evening. I had been walking back from the corner store, the sky already gray, when the first drops began to fall. By the time I reached my street, the rain had gathered strength, drumming hard against the pavement. I quickened my pace, clutching the bag in my hands when I heard her voice. "You'll get soaked out there, come here." She was standing under the wide porch roof of her house, her hand lifted as if beckoning me closer. I hesitated only a second before jogging across the street, ducking under the shelter. The rain thundered just beyond us, a curtain of sound that seemed to close the world off. I shook my jacket lightly, water dripping to the ground, and offered her a grateful smile. "Didn't think it would pour this fast. It always does when you don't have an umbrella," she said, her lips curved in that amused way she often carried. She looked at the small bag in my hands. "Worth the risk?" "Barely," I admitted with a laugh. Her laugh followed, softer, like a low hum that mixed with the rain. She leaned against the porch railing, relaxed but aware. I could feel it in the air, that quiet charge that seemed to find us whenever we were close. She disappeared inside for a moment, then returned with 2 steaming cups. "Tea," she said simply, offering one to me. As I reached for it, her fingers brushed mine. A small, unintentional touch, but it jolted through me, warming more than the tea itself. She must have felt it too, because her eyes flicked up to mine briefly before she turned away, as though studying the rain instead. We stood there side by side, sipping slowly. The sound of the storm surrounded us, steady and insistent, but between us was a strange stillness. My shoulder was just inches from hers, close enough that I could sense the warmth radiating from her. Every now and then, her sleeve shifted and lightly grazed my arm, and each time I felt my chest tighten. She broke the silence first. "I don't usually mind the rain. It makes the world slow down." I glanced at her, catching the thoughtful curve of her profile. "I know what you mean. It feels like everything else has to wait." Her lips parted in a faint smile, though she kept her eyes on the rain. "Exactly. For a long stretch, we didn't need words. The storm raged beyond the porch, but we stood in a pocket of calm, bound not by conversation but by the nearness of each other. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't loud, but it was something that pressed against the edges of my heart, quietly insistent. When the rain finally eased, she turned toward me, her hand resting lightly on the railing. "Looks like you'll make it home dry after all." I nodded, but I didn't move right away. Because part of me wasn't sure I wanted to step out from under her roof just yet. After that night under her porch, something shifted between us. It wasn't anything spoken outright, but the silence we shared had changed its texture. It was no longer the polite distance of neighbors, it carried a weight, a question neither of us had dared to answer. A few evenings later, I found her sitting on her front steps. The sun was dipping low, smearing orange and pink across the sky, and she had a cup of tea in her hand. I greeted her as I passed, but she surprised me by motioning for me to sit. "Long day?" she asked, watching me settle beside her. "Feels like most days are," I admitted, running a hand through my hair. Her laugh was soft, but then she exhaled and glanced at the horizon. "I know the feeling." For a moment she seemed to drift, her eyes caught in the fading light. Then she spoke, her tone quieter. "You know, people think because I carry myself a certain way, I've got everything together. That I don't get tired, or lonely, or restless." She swirled the tea in her cup, her voice steady but edged with something raw. The truth is, sometimes I don't even recognize myself anymore. I turned toward her, the honesty in her words pulling me closer. That doesn't make you less strong. It just makes you human. Her lips curved faintly, but not in amusement this time, in gratitude. She looked down at her hands, fingers tracing the rim of the cup. It's been a long time since anyone bothered to really listen. The vulnerability in her voice tugged at me. I wanted to reach out, to bridge the small gap between us, but I held back, sensing she needed space to release her thoughts more than she needed comfort. You deserve to be heard, I said simply. She glanced at me then, her eyes softer, lingering. For a second it felt as though the air between us tightened, the world narrowing until there was nothing but the two of us and the quiet honesty hanging in the dusk. Her laugh returned, but it was different now, lighter, almost self-conscious. You're dangerous, you know that? Making me talk like this. I smiled. Maybe it's not me. Maybe it's just time someone saw you clearly. Her eyes searched mine, and though she said nothing, I could see the conflict, half of her wanting to lean closer, half of her reminding herself of boundaries she wasn't ready to cross. She stood after a moment, smoothing her skirt, her guards slipping back into place but not quite as firmly as before. You should go rest. It's getting late. I nodded, though part of me wanted to stay, to keep peeling back the layers she had just revealed. As I walked back to my house, I knew one thing for certain: her walls weren't as unshakable as she wanted the world to believe. And I had just seen the first cracks. It was a quiet evening, the kind where the air feels thick with stillness and every sound seems louder than it should. I had just parked my car when I noticed her struggling with grocery bags near the trunk of hers. Need a hand? I called across the driveway. She glanced up, a little startled, then smiled. I hate to admit it, but yes. I crossed over quickly, sliding the heavier bags out of her arms. They weren't unbearable, but I could see the strain in her posture, the way her shoulders tensed, the faint crease at her brow. Where to? I asked. Kitchen, she said, pushing the door open with her hip. I followed her inside, the scent of her home wrapping around me. It was warm, spices lingering faintly in the air, a hint of lavender from something tucked away. I set the bags on the counter and turned just as she did. We almost collided, her hand instinctively reaching out, pressing lightly against my forearm to steady herself. The touch was nothing dramatic. Just her fingers resting gently, her warmth seeping through the thin fabric of my sleeve. But the moment stretched. Neither of us moved right away. Her hand lingered, her eyes meeting mine with a flicker of hesitation, as if waiting to see if I would step back. I didn't. Instead, I stood still, letting the quiet wrap around us. Her fingers curled slightly against my arm before she slowly drew them back, almost reluctant, as though aware of what the contact had revealed. Thank you, she murmured, her voice softer than usual. Any time, I replied, though the word felt heavier than its simplicity. She busied herself then, pulling items from the bags, lining them on the counter. But I noticed the small tremor in her movements, the way her breath caught once, quick and unsteady. I knew she felt it too, that spark neither of us had named, but both of us had stopped denying. I leaned against the counter, watching her for a moment. You do too much on your own, I said. She froze slightly, then laughed, though it didn't carry its usual lightness. If I don't, who will? I could, I said quietly. Her eyes flicked to mine, quick and searching, then dropped back to the groceries. She didn't answer, but the silence between us was louder than words. When everything was finally set away, I stepped back toward the door. She walked me out, pausing at the threshold. For a moment, we stood there, the night air cool against our skin. She looked at me as if she wanted to speak, but instead she just gave a small smile, grateful, a little guarded, yet touched with something tender. As I walked back across the driveway, I could still feel the echo of her hand on my arm. A small touch, yes, but one that carried the weight of everything we hadn't said. It happened after a small neighborhood gathering one weekend. A few of us had gathered at a neighbor's yard, nothing elaborate, just food, laughter, and the easy company of familiar faces. The night stretched longer than expected, lanterns strung between trees flickering as the breeze teased them. She had been there too, her presence impossible to miss. The way she carried herself, graceful, unhurried, made her stand out even when she wasn't trying. I found myself watching her more than I meant to, catching the curve of her smile, the tilt of her head as she spoke with others. Each time our eyes met across the crowd, there was a brief pause, as if the noise around us dulled for that heartbeat. When the gathering finally broke apart, I offered to walk her home. She didn't argue, only gave a small smile and nodded. We strolled slowly along the quiet street, the night cooler now, the echo of laughter fading behind us. Neither of us spoke at first. The silence was comfortable, but also charged, like we were both aware of the words hovering just beyond reach. Her arm brushed mine once, and I couldn't tell if it was accidental or deliberate. Either way, I didn't move away. At her doorstep, she turned to face me. The porch light painted her features in a soft glow, highlighting the faint weariness around her eyes, the gentleness in her expression. She hesitated, her hand resting lightly on the railing as though it grounded her. "You're dangerous," she said quietly, almost to herself. I frowned slightly. "Dangerous?" Her lips curved into a faint, almost rueful smile. "You make me forget things I promised myself I wouldn't feel again." Her eyes lifted to mine, searching, vulnerable in a way I hadn't seen before. "It's been easier, not wanting, not hoping. And then you." She stopped, shaking her head as if the words were too much. The air thickened between us. I felt my chest tighten, a rush of words rising in me, but I didn't speak them. Instead, I just looked at her, steady, letting her know without language that I understood. That I wanted to stay. Her hand slipped from the railing, and for a second it hovered, as though she might reach for me. But then she pulled it back, pressing her palm lightly against her own arm instead. "I should go in," she whispered, her voice steadying itself. I nodded slowly, though every part of me wanted to say more, to stop her retreat. But I stayed still, because I knew this moment wasn't about rushing forward. It was about the truth she had just let slip. She gave me a small, lingering look before stepping inside. The door closed softly, leaving me on the porch with the night air cool against my skin, my heart louder than the crickets in the grass. She had admitted just enough to change everything. The days after her quiet confession carried a different weight. Nothing had been declared outright, no promises made, but something had shifted. Each time I stepped outside, I caught myself glancing toward her house, wondering if she'd be there. Each time we crossed paths, her eyes lingered a little longer, her smile softer, less guarded. It was a cool evening when it finally happened. The air smelled faintly of earth and grass after a late afternoon drizzle. I spotted her in her garden, kneeling beside the flower beds with a small basket of clippings. A loose cardigan draped over her shoulders, and her hair was tied back simply, strands falling forward as she worked. I walked over slowly, not wanting to startle her. "Need an assistant?" I asked lightly. She looked up, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Only if you're good at pulling weeds," she said, but the warmth in her voice carried more than just playfulness. I crouched beside her, and for a while, we worked quietly, side by side. The sky darkened into a soft indigo, porch lights flickering on along the street. Our hands moved through the soil, brushing close now and then, each contact brief but electric. At one point, she reached up to tuck another stray strand behind her ear. But her eyes flicked toward me, and before she could finish, I gently brushed the hair back for her. My fingers lingered near her temple, and she froze, her breath catching softly. Her gaze lifted to mine. For a moment neither of us moved. Then, slowly, she raised her hand, brushing a leaf from my hair with a tenderness that made my chest ache. Her palm lingered at the side of my head, fingertips feather-light. Without thinking, I covered her hand with mine. Her skin was warm beneath my touch, steady yet trembling faintly, as if the moment carried more weight than either of us had expected. The silence around us thickened, but it wasn't empty. It was full, of all the unspoken words, the glances we'd shared, the laughter that had slowly become something more. You're not letting go, she whispered, her voice quiet but touched with something like relief. Not if you don't want me to, I said. Her lips curved, not into a laugh this time, but into a smile that felt softer, truer. She didn't move her hand away. Instead, she leaned the smallest bit closer, the space between us narrowing until I could feel the warmth of her breath in the cool night air. We didn't rush it. We didn't need to. Standing under the soft glow of her porch light, surrounded by the gentle hush of the neighborhood, it was enough to know we had both stopped pretending. What had begun with a playful laugh at a doorstep had grown into something deeper, quiet, steady, and alive. And as her hand rested beneath mine, I understood that whatever came next, it would be real.